100 million years ago, forests like these were just developing and were dominated by dinosaurs. But as the giant reptiles slept, tiny creatures were stirring. They were the early mammals. Despite this humble beginning, their descendants would ultimately take over the whole world. Yet the rise of this great dynasty was founded on the most surprising diet. Creatures very like those first mammals are still around today. Shrews. They hunted insects at night, when most of the dinosaurs were sleeping. Being mammals, they were able to generate heat in their tiny bodies so that they could stay active in the cold night air. But doing this burns a lot of food, so they had to eat almost continuously, as shrews still do. There's never enough food for a shrew, and rivals fight over hunting rights with extraordinary ferocity. This little insect eater has now staked his claim to the food in this part of the woodland. When he meets a female, he's almost as aggressive towards her as he is towards the rival male. After testing one another's strength, the female accepts the male not just as a contestant, but as a mate. Two weeks later, the young are born. Their mother has nourished them inside her womb, so they arrive comparatively well developed. Caring for the young is a crucial part of the mammal's winning design, something few reptiles do. A mother shrew will even quench her baby's thirst with her own saliva, if necessary. Most important of all, she provides them with that uniquely mammalian food, milk. This milk is so rich that it takes a mere 2 weeks for the young to approach their mother in size. By this time, they're quite a handful and need to be weaned from the nipple despite their protests. But their mother doesn't abandon them. She herself leads them into the world outside. And the young have their own particular way of ensuring that they don't get lost. The first mammals lived alongside the dinosaurs for a very long time. But then about 65 million years ago, when the dinosaurs so suddenly and dramatically disappeared, they had their chance to colonize new environments. To begin with, they remained very much the same, small, scurrying little creatures. But that, in fact, is a very versatile body pattern. And one of them, without much change, took to the water. It hunts just as frenetically as its cousins do on land, but it has a very different way of catching insects. The water shrew's fur is very oily and sheds water with the slightest flick. Its splendid whiskers are long to help it feel for prey underwater. Its ankles are hairy, so its feet serve as excellent paddles. It shines like silver, glistening from the bubbles trapped within its fur as it searches everywhere for prey. Clinging to the underside of a root, a dragonfly larva. But the shrew's whiskers don't touch it, and it's missed. But not this time. In Africa's Namib Desert, another insect hunter swims after prey, but without a drop of water in sight. It's a sand swimmer, a golden mole. Sand, unlike water, scratches, and it isn't transparent either, so the mole's eyes are covered with hairy skin, and its head has become a leathery wedge with which it forces its way through the sand. As it digs, the sand collapses behind it, making it impossible for a tunnel to form. So it doesn't dig through the sand, it really does swim. Sound travels well in sand. Unlike shrews, which are adapted to hear high-pitched sound, this mole detects very low ones, like the faint vibrations made by foraging termites. Propelled by its flippers and guided by sound, the golden mole homes in on its prey. In North America, another mole has paws that look like flippers. These help it to swim under ice to collect insects, but this is not their primary purpose. This creature is a digger, a star-nosed mole. Its paws are spades for pushing aside soil, while it tries to locate its prey with its astonishing nose. This has 22 fleshy arms. Each is so densely packed with nerve endings that the mole could touch a pinhead with its nose in 600 places at once, allowing it to locate the tiniest of prey. Living in soil rather than sand, this mole can dig proper tunnels. It constructs a labyrinth of passages and regularly patrols them to collect any prey that drops into them. The star nose underground is largely beyond the reach of predators. Other insect hunters, however, run along trails above ground, and they are not so lucky. And one of these trail runners lives here in the scrublands of East Africa. This tiny pathway through the withered grass is a sure sign that the insect hunting rights for this part of the world have been taken. And to advertise the fact, the owner has left a little pile of its dung. But what could have made it? Well, to find out, I can use this tiny surveillance camera. If I put that there, and then just in front of it, put some twigs across the path. The creator of these runways is very fastidious, and with any luck, it'll stop to clear away the twigs and then give us a chance to have a good look at it. This is the picture from the surveillance camera I've just placed, and this is another one from another camera farther up the same trail. Now, all I have to do is to wait. It's an elephant shrew. He's not gonna like that. There you go. He's clearing his trail. Oh. Oh dear, I'm afraid I put in too much. The elephant shrew, or sengi, keeps its trails immaculate for very good reason. It sprints to evade its enemies. Even the smallest twig could cause a stumble that could be disastrous. The goshawk has such keen eyesight that spotting a sengi is no problem. Catching one is another matter. The sengi holds a map of its trails in its mind, so that in emergencies it can cut corners to dive for cover. Even a brush with death doesn't put a sengi off its food. Like all small insect hunters, it needs to constantly fuel its internal fires. That is especially important when they're young to feed. Incredibly, this sengi is only a few hours old. Few mammals are born as well developed as a baby sengi, and this gives them a crucial survival edge. Daytime in the African bush is no place for the helpless. Sengis are born to run. Its appetite for milk is unquenchable, for growing at this speed gives it constant hunger. Its mother has nipples near her shoulders, which makes them easier to reach and presumably helps a quick getaway. The baby will take solid food from its mother on its very first day, if it gets a chance. With continued help from its mother, the youngster will be almost fully grown within a week and be able to run as fast as her along their racetracks. Catching insects one by one takes a lot of time and a lot of energy, and very few creatures that feed that way can get enough to build and sustain big bodies. But some insect eaters early in their history, about 40 million years ago, solved that problem by broadening their diet. And one of their descendants lives right here in my garden in London, and I can tempt it out with a wide variety of food, including, for example, minced meat. The hedgehog is still very much a creature of the night, but it's too big to hide in the leaf litter. That makes it vulnerable to attack from animals like foxes. To make up for this, its hairs have become a cloak of prickles. And if it thinks it's in real danger, it's got a special trick. The hedgehog will stay an impregnable spiny ball like this until it decides that danger has passed. But one thing is guaranteed to make a male hedgehog drop his guard: the promise of an amorous liaison. If you're outside on a spring evening, you may be lucky enough to witness an extraordinary sight. You might think that having a coat of spines on your back would be something of a handicap when it comes to the intimacies of courtship. And indeed, classical naturalists thought that hedgehogs actually mated belly to belly. The male noses the female's spines, which seems to excite her. Although, as far as he's concerned, it does look rather painful. Whether the female flattens her prickles to help the male is unclear, but it does seem that the old joke that asks, "How do hedgehogs mate?" was right all along. The answer is, of course, with great care. The early American insect eaters also needed to protect themselves, but they did so not with spines, but with armor plating. Armadillos, like hedgehogs, grew large by broadening their diet. Their tastes change with the seasons. Fruit is easy to collect, but the 9-banded armadillo is not very fastidious and will pick up anything that looks edible. It still eats insects, but ants present it with a problem. Its armor may protect it from large predators, but it isn't particularly good defense against small prey. One extraordinary African insect hunter has no such trouble. It's a pangolin. Those horny scales, like the hedgehog's bristles, are made from modified hair. Its front claws are so big that they're useless for walking. Instead, it trundles along on its hind legs, balancing its torso with its tail. Its front claws are reserved for digging up ants. As it does so, it swallows stones. They accumulate in its muscular stomach and help to grind up the ants. But these small underground ant colonies are mere snacks to a pangolin. This is a real meal, a full-sized ant's nest. There are 1 million or so of them a year. The pangolin smashes through the nest wall with formidable power. Only an adult has the strength to do this. So young ones have to stay with their mother, feeding in her wake until they're big enough to dig for themselves. The angry ants swarm all over their attacker, but the pangolin's armour is a very effective defence. Its eyes are protected by thick lids, and both its nostrils and its ears have special valves to keep the biting insects out. For its size, the pangolin has the longest tongue of any mammal, and the stickiest saliva. But mammals didn't always have ant colonies to feed on. The rise of social insects 60 million years after the first mammals was a landmark in evolution. It was then that termites and ants started to build huge nests, each containing millions of individuals. Here was so much food that insect eaters could grow big. There are termites in the Americas, just as there are in Africa. So, of course, there are termite eaters too. And here in Brazil is the biggest of them all, the giant anteater. Its eyesight is very poor, and it relies mostly on its sense of smell, which is very acute. But if I keep downwind of it, I may not disturb it too much. The truth of the matter is that ants and termites aren't very nutritious, so the giant anteater has to do all it can to conserve energy. And one way of doing that is to sleep for 15 out of 24 hours. It covers itself too with that big bushy tail to reduce heat loss to a minimum. And it also keeps its body at as low a temperature as any mammal, 32 degrees. That means, of course, that its brain doesn't work very fast. So it's not an animal with lightning reactions or a dazzling intelligence. But then you don't really need that if you're an anteater. And now I think I'll get out of its way. Termite mounds are more numerous here than anywhere, but the challenges facing a termite eater are nonetheless considerable. Anteaters and pangolins have different ancestors, but the demands of their diet have shaped them in similar ways. Both have big claws. The giants are the largest, in fact, of any mammal, and both have an immensely long tongue that slips through the tube formed by the toothless jaws, so that both can virtually drink termites. I'm going to treat him with caution, because in fact those huge claws and those powerful front legs can be very dangerous. He can rip apart this termite hill, and if he wants to defend himself, he will use those big bowed legs and their claws and grip you. It's even been said that the carcass of a jaguar was found in the embrace of one of these. Surprisingly, it only collected a few hundred termites on that brief visit. As soon as it breaks into a mound, the inhabitants attack it so ferociously that they drive it away. But quick sampling like this does have an advantage. The termites will soon replace the ones they've lost, so, in effect, the anteater is harvesting the termite hills in its territory in a way that ensures a continuous supply. It may not have a dazzling intelligence, but nothing exploits termites more effectively than the giant anteater. If you wanted to explore the origins of this extraordinary animal, you'd have to go to a very surprising place. I'm near Messel in Germany. Behind me is a quarry rich in the fossilized remains of animals that died 50 million years ago, and that was a pivotal time in the history of the mammals. Even though these animals lived a very long time ago, some of them look remarkably familiar. This is a tree anteater, very like the Camandoa anteater that lives in South America today. All the insect collecting equipment is there. Huge claws on the front legs, no teeth, and jaws fused into a tube through which a long tongue would have flicked. And alongside the anteater, the first known pangolin. Once more, it has huge claws, no teeth, and again it looks identical with its living equivalent, the African pangolin of today. But why should these animals have remained unchanged for 50 million years? Well, the rocks of Messel provide an answer to that too. From them have come a termite. More importantly, the queen of a termite colony. And it's the same in every important respect as its living relatives. And this is the key. If termites haven't changed for 50 million years, why change the design of the perfect termite eater? Even back then, the majority of insects were airborne and out of reach of ground-dwelling mammals. But one mammal followed the insects into the air, and fossils of it have also been found in the messel deposits. It's the bat. Flight and the ability to catch insects on the wing is an extraordinary achievement. How do the bats do it? This is a great place for bats. There are a lot of insects flying around. At the moment, birds are feeding on them and bats are asleep in their roost. But soon it'll get dark and then the birds will go to roost and the bats will come out to claim their share. Now, at night, there are even more flying insects than there were during the day. And down by the mill stream, there's a colony of Dorbenton's bats that are already stirring. Their little faces are so like a shrew's that it's easy to imagine shrew-like ancestors in the trees, jumping from branch to branch, chasing insects. Ever larger flaps of skin between their fingers help to extend those jumps, until, eventually, they could fly. And how they can fly. The change from a scurrying animal like a shrew to a fluttering bat is surely the most magical in the whole history of the mammals. The bat's mastery of flight is so complete that few insects can outmaneuver them in the air. The bat scoops up the moth with the membrane around its tail and then passes it forward to the mouth. Their ground-living ancestors probably used sound to find their way through the nighttime forests, as shrews still do. But bats then perfected that technique, using sound frequencies beyond our hearing. A bat detector makes those calls audible to us. Bats emit high-intensity pulses of sound and then listen to the echoes that bounce back. Their brains then process these reflections to give them a three-dimensional image of their surroundings and their prey. Moths, with their rather laborious flight, are relatively easy to catch. But then some evolved a defense, a simple ear, so that when they hear the sonar of a bat approaching, they can swerve out of the way. So one bat changed tactics. The long-eared doesn't hunt with sonar. It uses its enormous ears to listen for prey. It can even filter the faint sound of a moth's wing beats through the noise of the rushing water. Its sonar guides it through the branches, but as it approaches the moth, it turns that off and enters stealth mode. Now it's guided solely by the noise of the moth's wing beats. But the system isn't perfect. The bat can hear the moth through the leaf, and it's approaching it from the wrong side. A lucky escape for the moth. But now the bat has come round to the other side. If the moth stays still, it doesn't make any noise at all, so the bat can't locate it. But sooner or later, the moth will have to move. And that is its undoing. But how could a bat catch prey that is silent in a place like this, which is so cluttered with vegetation that echolocation shouldn't work? These places are difficult to navigate, but they are full of food. Spiders are more nutritious than moths, but they are silent, venomous, and construct webs that are so strong that a bat could easily become fatally entangled in the sticky silk. Here comes Natura's bat. It seems well aware of the almost microscopically thin silken threads, and with surgical precision removes the spider from its web. It even reverses away from the web to avoid getting entangled. To detect the silk threads and recognize which side of the web the spider is sitting must surely be the ultimate refinement of sonar. Mexican three-tailed bats. They form some of the biggest and the densest assemblages of mammals to be found anywhere on the planet. There are 12 million of them in this one cave alone. But where does such a vast number of individuals find enough food within reasonable flying distance of where they roost? That was a puzzle which baffled people for a long time. But now we are beginning to discover what they feed on and where they find it, and it's very surprising. A few years ago, pilots flying above Texas reported seeing bats at high altitude. Scientists investigated and made an extraordinary discovery. As I climb into the evening sky, the weather conditions seem good. But the local weather radar shows a storm nearby growing with alarming speed. However, I needn't worry. This is not a storm, it's the bats we've just left, leaving their roost. They start from a number of points. Each is the mouth of a different cave. The swarms are vast, with up to 20 million bats leaving a single entrance. Some fly low over Texas, but curiously, most start to climb. At 10,000 feet up, bats are so widely dispersed that it's very difficult to see them. But I've got with me my bat detector. And there's one. And what is more, that is a feeding buzz. So they're eating something. The question is, what? They're already a kilometre above the ground, and most are still climbing. But now the radar picks up another front blowing in from New Mexico, and the bats are flying towards it. What could there be to attract them to these great heights? Scientists find out what's flying high in the sky at night with a device like this. And in it, moths. Vast numbers of these insects use the prevailing winds at altitude to travel up from the tropics to feed, and bats climb up to 3 kilometers into the night sky to catch them. Bats are so numerous and so voracious that the individuals in this one cave below me eat 120 tons of insects every night. So, if bats have such ravenous appetites, how do they survive during the winter when there are no flying insects around? In Texas, they migrate. But here in Canada, they have a truly radical solution. Outside it's 20 degrees below freezing. Inside icicles hang from the ceiling. And yet these little brown bats can survive throughout the winter without a single meal. How do they do it? The thermal imaging camera is showing my face as red and orange. That's because it's warm. I'm a mammal. Putting it more precisely, I'm losing energy as heat. But these little bats are blue because they are cold as the rock to which they're clinging. As the bats are no longer losing any heat to their surroundings, they're using hardly any energy at all, and their metabolism has slowed down almost to a stop. Although they're in the deepest hibernation, they have to wake up every now and then to have a drink. And as they fire up their body chemistry, so their image on the thermal camera glows like a furnace. Once awake, a male seeks out the slumbering females. This one won't get a warm reception, but he won't meet with much resistance either. He will mate with several more, and then, after a drink, he will return to sleep until the spring. The power of flight not only enabled bats to catch insects in the air, it also allowed them to extend their range far beyond that of any other mammal. bats were the first mammals to find their way to some fragments of land that were isolated in the South Pacific, New Zealand. Here there were no cats, no rats, but lots of insects. It was a paradise for any insect hunter. So the bats flourished, and their descendants are still here, somewhere. To see them, I must wait for darkness. And this is the species I've been waiting for. These bats look normal enough, but bats are aerial predators, and much of the uneaten prey in New Zealand is down on the ground. They can fly all right, but our infrared camera reveals that they also have a very un-bat-like way of hunting. They land on the ground and forage through the leaf litter just like shrews. They're walking on their wrists, with the bones of their fingers pointing upwards and slotted into a groove along the upper arm. Now they seem to be hunting as a pack. Insects or other small creatures in the leaf litter, fleeing from the jaws of one, run straight into those of another. Worms are a great favourite, so much more satisfying than several hundred mosquitoes, and they don't want to share them with one another either. They complete their meal with a drink of nectar from the Hades plant that bloomed flat on the ground. They're this plant's pollinators. Relationships between a plant and its pollinator take a long time to evolve, so these bats must have been scuttling over the New Zealand forest floor for many millions of years. Worms and nectar are easy prey, but what about this? It's a weta, a giant flightless cricket with spiny legs and ferocious jaws. How could bats, whose ancestors ate mosquitoes, tackle this? The weta can flick its back legs forward with surprising force. And even if you dodge that, you still have to contend with its powerful jaws. The giant insect gains the upper hand. But it's soon overwhelmed by numbers, and these extraordinary bats now fight one another over its remains with equal ferocity. Evolution doesn't often go into reverse, but it seems to have done so here. After several million years of aerial combat, these bats are reverting to the hunting techniques of their shrew-like ancestors. Mammals have pursued insects to the far corners of the earth. They've chased them up into the skies and back down to the ground again. The insect eaters were there right at the beginning of the rise of mammals, and they're still here today. They're one of the great success stories in the life of mammals.